Today, my guest is Professor Ronaldo Parente. I'll keep my introduction short to maximize our time with him. In the next 30 minutes or so, we'll talk about Ronaldo as a person. Professor Parente is a thought leader and an esteemed scholar, and finally, is a mentor to many PhD students and junior faculty. For the sake of time, I'll skip many of his accomplishments and give you a very quick snapshot. Professor Parente is a senior editor for the International Journal of Emerging Markets and an associate editor for the Cross-Cultural Strategic Management Journal. He serves on the editorial review boards of JEBS, Thunderbird International Business Review, Global Strategy Journal, Cross-Cultural Management Journal, and the Journal of International Management. He is one of the vice presidents of the Ibero-American AOM. He served as an elected board member for the European International Business Association and served at various roles at SMS. He chaired and organized two SMS special conferences in Brazil, the 2018 SMS conference in Sao Paulo and 2011 SMS conference in Rio. He received the prestigious Sereia de Ouro, I hope I said it right, the Golden Mermaid Trophy in 2006, International Award in Brazil, and was a finalist for the Farmer Best Dissertation Award at AIB in 2004. Thank you, Ronaldo, for joining us.
Thank you, guys, for inviting me.
Ronaldo, what did you want to become when you were a child?
I wanted to be a guitar player in a rock band or a professional surfer. Did not happen.
And for how
really,
long did you...
that's what I want to be. I want to be a guitar player in a rock band. And then I started surfing when I was 7 years old. So right in the beginning of the surfing fad in Brazil. And I was dreaming about Hawaii, California, and going to become a professional surfer. It ended up that I never learned how to play guitar. I tried several times. I'm trying now. I have a guitar here that I'm trying again for the 10th time. I'm still terrible at it. And the surf, I did surf and I still surf, but I was never very good for that.
When did you realize there was a international world out there? Can you pinpoint the earliest moments between domestic?
Well, Brazil, being from Brazil, anything, when you say the word international, this was, I grew up, I was a kid in the 70s. So in the 70s, growing up in Brazil, anything that happened in the US would take about a month to get to Brazil. Anything, Brazil was a very close economy. And so information, everything was very close. It was a dictatorship. And being foreigner means being from the US. That's why, being in America was the farthest that we can think of international. And we follow being a surf, like I said, I surfed since I'm 7 years old. I live right on the beach in Rio. And being a surfing, there was something that caught my attention, my friend's attention when I was a kid. There was the Z-Boys in California. The Z-Boys in California was those guys doing skateboard in the empty swimming pools in the 70s, and they were a surf team. And then we'd fight for magazines that come from the US, showing Gary Lopes surfing in Hawaii, the big waves, perfect waves of those tubes. And that was a dream, we lived, we wait like 6 months for a movie that was shown here to get to Brazil, 6 months, almost 1 year later. And then when the movie gets there in Super 8 format, we all get together and we'll watch and we're amazed by those pipeline surfers and the Z-Boys in the pools. So that was my awareness. It was, for me, the world was composed of Brazil, US, and US, I mean California and Hawaii, and the rest of the world. That's it.
Interesting. About academia, how did you choose academia? How did you end up?
Yeah, that's an interesting story because that's my third profession. I'm trained as an engineer, and I work as an engineer many years, designing buildings and things. I work as an engineer. Then I started working very early. I'm 18 years old. I start in a serious job. I pass in a competitive exam to join a government development bank of Brazil, which was a very good job at the time. And I I went to the engineer department building. From there, I decided to do something more in line with banking, and I start switching to finance. and I became financial analyst and risk management analyst. I worked in missions with the Interdevelopment Bank of World Bank and the Inter-American Bank of Development for sanitations in Brazil, big development projects in Brazil. And then I decided to get an MBA in finance. I came here to get an MBA with a concentration in finance. And after the concentration in finance, I went back to Brazil, and a friend of mine invited me to, since you got a master's degree, why don't you teach a course here in corporate finance? I said, okay. So I went to teach as adjunct professor in the local university. And that bite me. And from there on, all I want to do is teaching. And I was doing part-time teaching and full-time, something that I didn't like very much. So I started applying for the PhD. After third year applying, I finally got a scholarship, and I came to Temple University. And I got accepted as a finance major, finance risk management. I was a risk management major with a minor in finance in Temple. And then the second semester, I went to see a lecture by Masako Tabi, which is a big IB scholar, was the president of AIB, and he had just joined Temple University, and he gave a lecture, and I decided to go see it. And then I fell in love with IB, and I started talking to him. To make a long story short, Michael Tai became my dissertation advisor, one of my best friends, mentor, friend, almost like a father figure to me. And we're still in touch until now. I think he just retired, but he was the guy who guided me through the process. And then I switched major. I switched to IB strategy, to the department where he was. That's how I became a scholar. And believe it or not, when I came to get a PhD, I thought only about teaching. I'm going to get a PhD, go back to Brazil and teach. I never really thought about doing research. Michael Tack was the one who told me, this is about research, and we have to resolve those complex issues and research questions. And then I started falling in love, and the rest is history. Interesting.
What's something that is not on your CV that people might find interesting?
I find that I love radical sports. I surf, I windsurf, I kite surf, I skateboard. I did all that in my life. Today, the only two I'm still doing is the surfing and kite surfing. Nobody knows, but I was like, I used to compete in windsurfing, in wave windsurfing. When you jump like 30 feet in the air and flip over and come back. I used to do that when I was 18, 17 years old. And I compete all over Brazil, and I was like ranked number 3 in Brazil for radical windsurfing.
That's very good, actually.
Yeah.
That's very good.
It's not in my resume.
Okay. Actually, this next question is going to be quite interesting. If you stopped what you're doing today, and you could start all over from scratch on a new trajectory, a new path, actually in your case, the third best alternative. What would you do?
That's a question, because I always keep thinking how my life would be if I had to take that track. When I was 18, 19 years old, I had the opportunity to open a surf shop. Okay. In the city, because we moved to Rio de Janeiro, to Fortaleza in the north. That was very underdeveloped, and there was no surf shops and no wax, nothing. So I got there, and I decided to open a surf shop, and I started the process of opening a surf shop. And what happened, I took the competitive exam for the bank, and I passed. So my father said, you can't open a surf shop. I won't help you open a surf shop. Now you have a real job that's safe and secure. So I never opened the surf shop. The guy who opened the surf shop, the same place I opened, ended up becoming a very successful guy, owns several shops all over Brazil, very successful. And if I had to do anything else today, if I can't teach anymore, I probably would open a surf shop, a water sports shop, to be in touch with young athletes and have the old guys come in and talk about the stories of their life in surfing, and then be a meeting place and be around the water and the sports all the time. That's what I'll do.
Regrets? Have you got any regrets other than this one?
Other what?
Other than the surf shop experience, do you have any regrets?
The regrets?
Regrets, yeah.
Yeah, my regret is that not realize that life was so short when I was young. I never realized life was short. And now with the pandemic, I lost a lot of friends my age. I lost my father. And personally, a big regret not having spent more time with my parents. My mother has Alzheimer's now, doesn't recognize me. My father passed from COVID. And life is short, you know, and now I'm going to be 60 years old. I'm 59, I'm going to be 60 in July. And, you know, you look back and you say, wow, this went very fast. And there's still so many things I could do it. And another thing that I would do it, I would never start working so early, like 18 years old, as I started. And I was locked in that bank position. And that prevented me from taking a lot of surf trips and travel to places like Bali, Hawaii with friends. And I didn't do it. And now I'm trying to do it, but now I have family, kids, and it's always a complication. So personally, that would be my regret. And professionally, I regret that I didn't start in academic right from out of college because it took me many years. I was 37 years old when I started my PhD. You know, so, and I pretty much restart my life. I moved from Brazil to here. I sold everything I had in Brazil. Then through my PhD, I went to a major exchange rate discrepancy. I pretty much lost everything I had. And I was well off financially in Brazil. And then when I finished my PhD, I was totally broke. I started over again at 43 years old with a family, 2 kids, owning money to everybody, banks, credit cards, everything. It was not easy, but I don't regret that I did. I think I made the right move. What I regret is not having done early.
Sure, I understand. What did you learn from your biggest failure?
My biggest failure, well, what is my biggest failure? Let's see. I don't take myself as a guy that did many failures, but maybe one failure that I consider is never have learned guitar. but I think you need to keep trying. I bought a guitar here. Look, electric guitar here. Bought a software and I practice every day, but I never learn. It's something that it's just hard for me, but I keep trying. I persistent. I'm persistent on that. That's one of the biggest failure of my life, and not being able to play guitar. And my son plays, my daughter plays, and I don't. But I think you can take from any failure that you have is that is an opportunity to learn and to do it better.
Okay, great. Ronaldo, let's say you're stranded in a surf shop. I don't know how you get stranded in a surf shop, but let's say you're among surfers, they don't know who you are, and they are curious about you, and you say, I'm a professor. How do you explain your research to people who don't read your work regularly? And why is your work important?
Well, the first phase of my research, which was my dissertation, and I did for until I got tenure, and I still do a little bit of it, but I was very focused, was very easy to explain because a lot of my friends, especially Brazilian, tend to like South Americans like cars. And I focus a lot on the automotive industry, on global supply chain systems, looking at modularity and how modularity will allow for co-design, co-location, things like that. And was something that me and Michael Tab were very interested together, and we did publish papers on that. And I actually made a name for that. Believe it or not, I haven't done a modularity paper for a while. And just the other day, I got a paper from Thunderbird International Reviews on modularity for me to review. And so people still see modularity and they send papers to me. But if you had to explain for people that don't know what it is, I like to say that, you know, what I do is try to learn how to solve complex problems in the world. You know, we live in a very complex world that things that happen all the time. We have disruption, and now more than ever, we have all this disruption, technological, the pandemic, and this creates an environment that is very complex. It's hard to make decisions. And I like to say that if you like to resolve complex problems, come up with solutions for complex problems, get a PhD, and then you're always going to find some complex problems. You may never solve, but you may never solve the problem, but you're always trying. And that's what keeps you going. And I changed, when I became associate professor, full professor, my research interest started becoming more aligned, even though I still have my interest in research. I started aligning my interest more with the PhD students because you need to have some synergy. So I've been very interested in sharing economy. I published a paper that's very highly cited in 2008 in Journal of International Management. It was a prospective research agenda paper that's been getting a lot of citations. And because of that paper, I read a couple of students from different universities look for me to help them. I published a couple of papers recently in JIBS, experiment with different methodologies, it was challenging, doing like qualitative work, which is very hard. But I did, was longitudinal qualitative work. One was in catch-up innovation, where we look at a Brazilian agricultural company in Brazil, how they were able to catch up with the big multinationals doing this since the 60s, the 70s, they longitudinal over a year. That was published in JIBS recently. And then also there was another interest paper where I saw a state-owned company from China moving into the Republic of Congo and completely create from scratch the total ecosystem, roads, suppliers, everything create from scratch. And this is another paper published in JIBS a few years ago. The biggest challenge there was like qualitative, looking at longitudinal one company qualitative work. It was a lot of work, but was very, I had a lot of pleasure in doing. It took a long time and it was very nice.
Perfect. About omitted variables or neglected areas in IB research, things we have not covered enough. What can you say?
I think we lack human behavior. We don't look too much at a micro level. And everything that happens at the firm level only happens because we have individuals there making decisions and with their own differences and diversity. And I think you don't see a lot of the application of the role of individual behavior into those IB research. We're starting seeing something now, but still not many. And I think it's very important to go with the micro level. I'm just working on a paper with a friend on individual creativity. And it's interesting because I always done research at the firm level. And now we are looking at individual creativity and how that develop competencies at the business level. So we look at the multi-level from how the firm individual will help the firm to create competencies that will make them more innovative. So that's an interesting question. And I think that's a big omitted variable. What else? Yeah, that's what I can think about in the top of my head.
Okay.
Individual roles, micro level.
Well, you mentioned your recent research stream on creativity, individuals being creative and leading to competence. How do you work? Where do you come up with these ideas? In a state of idle curiosity, your mind is wandering. How do you come up with ideas? Do you work every day? Do you write every day? What's the process like for you?
I like to take 2 hours a day to write. Force myself to write 2 hours a day.
Every day.
Something. If I'm not writing 2 hours a day, I'm reading something 2 hours a day. And I think that's the block of 2 hours to keep always reading. And when I mean reading, I don't mean reading academic papers, because I think the ideas don't come from academic papers. My ideas, all ideas that I had came from talking to executives. I have a lot of friends executives, reading more daily news like The Economist or Wall Street Journal. And I still like to read the actual paper, get my hands dirty. So I think by reading what is happening in the world and try to putting together things that helps you to come up with interest research question. Then of course, when your research question comes up, then you start writing. I always writing. I have a shoe box that I call idea box. And sometimes I have something, I write something, throw it in there. And then 3 months later, I look at it. Most of them I throw it away, but then, oh, this is nice, this is nice, I can use. But every time I have something, throw it in there, I write it so I don't forget. So by having once you have the idea, now you need to go back and see what has been done in the literature. Has anybody explored that topic? Now that's you start your research. See, the idea comes from reading daily news, from talking to individuals. And I was very curious. I'm very curious about everything. If I meet a new, if I'm with a group of friends and I meet somebody new that works in energy, oil and gas industry, I suddenly start asking questions. How you make decisions? How you strategize? How you decide to do this business? And from that, those conversations, those readings on a daily basis, come up with research questions that might be interesting. Then I go back to the literature and then I read. And then if I can make sense of the literature, that there's really a gap there, now I have everything to start a paper. If not, I just discard the idea and wait for the next one.
A student, perfect. A student comes to you and says, and they're at the very early stage, they don't really know what they want to work on. There's no passion at the moment. They want to ask you, because you have a crystal ball in front of you, what will be the next big question for the next 5 to 10 years in the field? And they're asking guidance, what to do, what to read about. What would you say about the next 5 to 10 years of the field?
Next 5, 10 years of the field, if I would have to tell a student, it's definitely going to be interdisciplinary. It's going to be multidisciplinary. That's not, for many years, I think IB has done research within IB. And even within IB, you have people that do strategy, global strategy, people that do international marketing, people do international finance. Everybody has a silos where they stay and they feel comfortable. I think for anybody, and all my students that you train today, I tell them not to be comfortable with that. I give them the international business field is going to be more complex, it's going to be more dynamic, and it's going to have to cut more across disciplines. So trying to find from beginning something that is interdisciplinary, okay? And what I mean by that is like, okay, if you're going to start how firms becomes more innovative, bring in the individual level to it. Try to look at what neuroscience is telling about how people make decisions. Try to look at the political environment, look at political science, what they decide about the politics of the world, how it's shaping now with everything that is happening between China, South Korea, US. Try to look at those external things to make sense of something. Of course, for the dissertation, you might work more narrow, but if you start thinking broadly, after you graduate, you have a bunch of ideas to spread out.
Yeah.
That are going to allow you to get tenure because you have a short clock. Once you graduate, the game just started. Now you have 5, 6 years to get tenure, and it's not enough. And more people want more publications in top journals. So by start thinking from the beginning in the interdisciplinary, even though for the dissertation you may have to be very focused on one thing, you already started looking at the periphery of your research and the cross links with other disciplines.
Interesting.
I think that's the way I think it's going.
Ronaldo, I asked this question to pretty much everyone now. There's a camp who says globalization is going to pick up again after COVID, the pandemic is over, or when the pandemic is over. And there's another camp, they say, well, actually protectionism, isolationism, nationalism, populism is going to be more profound over the next couple of decades. What's your take on it?
Well, I think the current pandemic really, we have those anti-globalization, populism even before the pandemic, okay? But they were not strong. They were not strong enough to really cause a change in the whole world system. Now with the pandemic, you see countries becoming more protective. By countries becoming more protective, the whole political agenda is changing. You see more polarization. You look at Brazil, you look at US, you look at every place. You look there's very few people in the middle now. Everybody has these extreme views from one side or another, and that takes away debate, discussions, and the way we grow as people and as researchers, as scholars, is by debating, discussing, and accepting points of view. When you have people in the extremes, that goes away. Now you only have this group here perpetuating what they think, and this group here perpetuating what they think, and not in the middle. And that's not good for society in general and the world in general. And I think it's going to be a hard time now coming out of this pandemic. We're going to have faced many challenges in the next few years. It's not going to be easy. But and of course, all those things are things that need to be incorporated into the IB research. Anti-globalization, populism. We can't be narrow-minded anymore. And there's going to be no room for narrow-minded.
Right, right. About advice and mentoring, I mean, you talked about Mike Kotabe and how he was influential. What was the best advice you received from Mike? Or anyone who actually gave you advice and mentoring? What was the best advice you received?
Mike Kotabe was my mentor. I say, of course, there were people that gave me advices and I pick up something. But if I have to break down 90% of what I am as a researcher and teacher came from Mike Kotabe. 10% came from everybody else that I learned in my career. I think my advice was instrumental in building me how to work. And some of the advices he gave to me that I give to my team. At first, I came to him and said, oh, I think I can buy this database so I can test my model. I said, no, you have to do a survey. You have to collect your own proprietary data. That's yours. And once you collect the survey, you have to think about the papers in the dissertation, maybe one or two more research credits in the future you might have it. So I had to do a survey. Today, a lot of firms don't like survey because you have to have two respondents. A lot of journals need two respondents. It become more complicated. But at the time I did, one respondent per company was okay. So I had to go. He financed me. We went to Brazil together. We visited companies. We interviewed. It took me a year and a half collecting data. Okay. And I think by collecting that data, it helped me a lot. Okay. So the other thing is that he always told me that you have to develop the ability to be part of the conversation. If you don't understand, once I decide to talk about modularity, I had to know who are the 10 biggest players doing modularity. Because I have to be able to go, if you imagine a meeting room with all those 10 people that are working the same topic that you are, you have to be able to go in there, walk in there, and have something to say to them, even if it's one incremental step. But you have to tell them something that they're going to say, this is interesting. That is really building on what we already did. Mm-hmm. So, and people, they tend not to think about that. They come up with a research question, they get the data that exists, and they start testing. And then 5 years later, they find out, there's not 20 people that did the same thing. So if you don't start thinking that from the beginning, it's like taking a shortcut, and then the shortcut catch with you later. Okay?
Yeah. That's right.
So, I think Mike Kotabe, those two advice that Mike Kotabe always gave was very important. And of course, but I tell my students too that, if you're going to be an academic, you better be able to deal with rejection. Some people are not very good at dealing with rejection. And, for every GIBS that I published, I think I got rejected 2 or 3 times. So I remember being rejected is hard, and especially in the beginning. After a while, you get used to, but you need to build that resiliency that allows you to get rejected. Take a deep breath, shake it off, and start over. And you get really, I remember my first paper for my dissertation got an R&R in SMJ. And when the R&R came, I'm very inexperienced. I start, responding to the reviewers as I disagree with them. No, you're wrong. This, I know about this. You don't. No, I got rejected. It doesn't work like that. So you have to be humble, and you have to deal with rejection. If you don't know how to deal with rejection, you're not going to succeed in this business. And also, you need to be able to build interpersonal and intercultural relationships. Most of my co-authors I developed by going to the conferences and meeting them in the doctor consortium, then in the junior faculty consortium. You need to be able to collaborate with different people from different cultures, from different countries, from different points of view, and develop that ability to the people skills. I think people skills is very important. Of course, there are some people they are very successful there. They has no people skills in academia, but they just like super genius. If you get the Academy of International Business, there's 3,000 members there. There might be 5 that are super genius. 10 people that don't need anybody. They do everything alone. They super genius. But those are few. Majority of the people work very hard, work alone, get rejected, work hard again, and and then finally you make one incremental contribution. You're not going to break through. Guys like Jay Barnett that invented a different theory, or guys like Peter Buckley. Those guys are super genius. They develop something new, and I really envy them. And they're very nice. Some of them are my friends, and they're very nice people. But most people, like normal people like me, we have to build a network of collaboration. We have to develop people's skills. We have to have the ability to interact. We have to be able to accept different ideas. We have the ability to take rejections at face value, rework, and go one more time for the route, and maybe reject again. If you don't develop that idea and get mad, you're not going to succeed for a long time. It's going to be tough.
I was lucky. My strategy advisor was Jay Barnett. My international business advisor was Odette Shankar. I mean, they are at the top of the field in their area. So I was lucky in that aspect. But something you said about being humble and knowing the review process. Review process actually is what makes or breaks a paper. So many papers are discarded because the review process is not handled well. I mean, the minute you start fighting back with the editor, the minute you give back the referees what you think about their knowledge or what you interpret as their knowledge, I mean, that paper is doomed to die. It's
Look, I had a paper. I had a paper which I thought was a very good paper, and Mike Watabe had thought too it was a very good paper. Went to 3 rounds of review in Journal of Management. And after 3 rounds of review, the editor decided to call, we satisfy all the 3 reviewers. The editor called another reviewer who questioned something in the paper, and the editor rejected. I was already 100% sure that was going to be a publication. And this was like 6 months before my tenure.
Wow.
That was really disruptive. But I had to learn. I talked to Watabe, and I had to recoup and move on. I still got tenure, but it was very risky. My tenure would be a breeze with that paper. Without that paper, it was risky, but I got it. And but if you can't lose, you have to stay focused.
Yeah. Well, okay. For this
paper, because the paper was good, and Mike Watabe was good, and several people that I know. I think it was a mismanagement of the editor. The editor did something wrong.
I mean,
deal with that, fight with that. That's move on.
There can be many reasons, and one of my earlier papers, I sent it to JIBS. It was rejected. I sent the same paper to AMJ, and after a couple of rounds, really hard work, it got in. And you can't say, oh, this is going to be automatically rejected, this is going to be automatically accepted. There's no such thing. It is knowing the review process, handling the review process, a skill on its own that we don't really teach in the schools. There's a lot of patience, a lot of humility, a lot of hard work that goes into it. And every time there's a revision, it's a rewrite. And people...
Papers, if you paper that was the first time you submit, and the ones that was published,
it's not the same paper. So
I had one interest review one time that when I got the revise and resubmit, I said, well, great. And then when I started reading the reviewer's comments, I said, This guy reject me. This guy reject. It looks like I was rejected by all reviewers, but the editor liked my paper so much that he gave a chance, a high-risk revision. And then we went to the process. The paper became a completely new paper and ended up being published. So you have all these kind of different things that you have to learn how to deal with.
Right. For the sake of time, Ronaldo, what's the question that I should have asked you but haven't?
That one I wrote it down. Okay, how can we build relationships in academia, and find good co-authors? How you find good co-authors and how you build? And another one that I put here was, how can you find the right balance between research, teaching, leisure, and family? Because without the balance, it might be very hard to be successful, because then you might stress too much on one side. And if you stretch too much on one side, without the balance, you might have a breakdown. I think I always thought that it's very important for any academic to be a balance between your family, your leisure, your fun, things you like to have, your hobbies, the teaching, because it's part of our profession. I don't like when people say, "Oh, I like to do research. I hate teaching." You build knowledge so you can transfer knowledge. It's part, I don't really agree with that statement. I love teaching. Actually, one thing that makes me proud is, like, I have a former student that became CEO of a big multinational in Brazil. So that makes me proud. And then do your research with ethics, moral values, resilience, and work hard. So that's important. And for the first question, how to build relationships in academia? Well, first thing, luckily it's not the majority, but you go out there and you see some people that become very arrogant, And it's funny because the real smart people like Peter Buckley, Jay Barr, they're not arrogant, they're very nice people. But, there's some people that somewhere in the middle, they start getting good publications, and then they start becoming very arrogant and walk with their nose up. They decide who to talk to. And it's really strange, I find people those type of people is very strange. So don't become arrogant. And in order to find good relationships, I talk to everybody in the I go to conferences, join the junior faculty, volunteer to be part of some of the leadership committees. Get involved in your community, in the IB, in this. I'm strategy IB, so I'm very involved in the SMS and very involved in the AIB. And I volunteer. I was officer several times. I review for journals. I do everything, and I participate in every possible junior faculty consortium, every social hour. When I go to conferences, I go to see what people are doing, what people are working on, but also to meet people, to make new friends, to see what people are working on, to discuss my ideas, to get feedback from my ideas. And then maybe over a beer, you find a co-author, or in the junior faculty consortium. So you're not going to find a consortium. I had colleagues that graduate with me. I hate conference. I don't like to travel. I don't like to go to conference. It doesn't make sense for me. Okay. I'm a very social person, I think. And to find good co-authors is not easy, because there will be problems. You need how to deal with, when I mentioned before, developing people skills. You need to be able to deal with bad co-authors. That's going to be times where there'll be conflicts between co-authors. And because, everybody's working like in a pipeline of 4, 5, 6 different papers. Okay. And the two of you are working together. But then the paper is first priority for you, but it's 5th priority for the other guy. So you have to really be, I think the best way to build relationship with co-authors is to be transparent and frank, what the priorities are, how we're going to conduct this, create deadline, create things, and everybody committed to. I was very lucky with my co-authors because they're very transparent. We always did very well. But I know people that had hard times with co-authors, and I know people that hate to work with co-authors, like to do everything by themselves. I don't. It's a lonely profession. I'm already alone in my office, alone. I like to discuss with people. And of course, relationships, today with Zoom, it became a little easy because we have meetings at Zoom. But when I started, if you had a co-author in another country, you'll be dealing with emails back and forth. And the written language is not the same as you see in the person's face.
True.
It's very low context, so it's not the same. Now I think with Zoom, the pandemic brought this technology to us that is making it easy for co-authorship.
That's right. Ronaldo, thank you so much for your time. I enjoyed this conversation.
Answer your question to satisfaction.
Perfect. It was perfect. I'm sure the audience will agree with me. Thank you.
One thing that I love about academics that I can do until I'm drop dead. I don't do research and teach until I cannot walk to the school. Don't need to retire.
Hopefully it will be a long time. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Very much, you guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.